Cornel Young Jr. was a young black man shot and killed by two white police officers during an altercation outside an all-night restaurant in Providence, Rhode Island. As we first reported last November, Young had a pistol in his hand, and the police thought he was coming to help the people involved in the disturbance. They were wrong. Cornel Young Jr. was an off-duty Providence police officer coming to help them. It happened at an all-night restaurant in a rough section of Providence. It was after 1:30 a.m. last January 28th when off-duty police officer Cornel Young Jr. came in for a steak club sandwich. He was waiting for his takeout order when a fight broke out among some of the patrons. Night manager Mahmoud Kosh threw them out and called the police when the fight spilled out into the parking lot. It wasn't until someone outside yelled that one of the men had a gun that Officer Young decided he had to get involved. He pulled a semi-automatic service pistol from a holster in the small of his back. He identified himself as a policeman, and he went out the door to assist his fellow officers who had just arrived on the scene. Wearing a hooded sweatshirt and a baseball cap turned backwards, he walked into the parking lot and pointed his pistol at Joseph Heyman, who was standing right in front of him.
He says, freeze, I put my hands up. He turns, they shoot him, I run that way.
So he says, freeze.
I put my hands up.
Then he turns.
And they shoot him.
How long did it take from the time that he yelled freeze to you and the time that he was shot?
To me, it was like seconds.
Seconds.
You blink your eye, you would have missed it.
Hit 3 times, Officer Young collapsed in the snow just a few steps from the restaurant door. The 2 officers who fired the shots thought they had stopped an armed assailant. They said if Officer Young identified himself when he came outside, they never heard him, and claimed they ordered him 6 times to drop his weapon. It wasn't until minutes later that one of the backup officers realized what happened. My God, she said, he's one of ours. Not only was he one of theirs, he was a model police officer and the son of the highest-ranking minority officer on the Providence force.
That's a picture of him and I when he was in the police academy.
Major Cornel Young Sr. was the model for the son who wanted to follow in his father's footsteps.
We went over this exact same scenario, and he followed it to a T. He followed right procedures right to the T.
You talked about this scenario. You mean when he's off duty?
If he's off duty, the only time you react is if your life or someone else's life is in danger. And that's what he did. He only reacted because he heard that there was a gun out there and somebody was going to get shot. And that's, as off-duty police officer, that's when you're supposed to react.
You think he believed that the police officers knew who he was?
Oh, yes. No doubt about it.
As it turns out, one of the officers who shot Young was Carlos Saraiva, a police academy classmate. Saraiva might have been expected to recognize Young, but testimony showed he wasn't wearing his glasses when he opened fire. He just returned to active duty after being investigated in another shooting incident. In spite of this, Saraiva was paired as a training officer with a rookie. Michael Salitro had been on the job all of 8 days.
You can't take the bullets back. But, and it's still in all, a police officer has that much time to make a decision, life and death decision like that. You know, many police officers that have hesitated got shot. So, I mean, it's a hard one to call.
I mean, one of the police officers was in his class at the academy.
Yeah. And they knew each other. That's why I say, I know the guy didn't say, that's Cornel Young Jr., I'm going to shoot him. Did he react too fast because of his color? That remains to be, the only one who knows that is him. And I'm not even sure he knows that.
Did you ever talk to your son about the difficulties of being a minority police officer?
Oh, yes, of course. Of course I did. That's why I didn't want him to be a police officer.
Cornel Young's mother, Lisa, had been divorced from Major Young for more than 20 years, but they still shared a son. Do you ever tell you stories where he'd seen an element of racism in the police department?
Sure. When I was in college, we lived in a Section 8 building that was an old factory.
Public housing.
Off Port Street. Yeah, public housing. And they had rode by, I guess, during his time in the academy and said, this is where the scumbag live. And my son said, no, this is where me and my mom lived.
Cornel Young Jr. received a hero's funeral. The shooting had a huge impact on the city of Providence. Police officers from Rhode Island and surrounding states lined the city streets. The funeral was carried live on local television. While Providence was a city unified in mourning, it was also a city divided by a history of racial tension and the minority community's distrust of the police. The shooting brought out years of resentment and anger. members of the minority community filled the corridors of City Hall, demanding an independent outside investigation into Officer Young's death. Lisa Young supported it. But there was no outside investigation. Instead, Rhode Island Attorney General Sheldon Whitehouse formed his own investigative team that included 6 members of the Providence Police Department. A grand jury heard from some 50 witnesses. Attorney General Whitehouse boiled the findings down to a single sentence.
The grand jury has concluded that no criminal action shall be taken against the officers involved.
What bothered Lisa Young the most was that the grand jury's conclusion came with no report, no explanation, no answers to the questions she had about her son's death. Give me some of the questions you want answers to.
I want to know why the officer didn't recognize my son when he went through the academy with him. I wonder how, when there were so few minorities in that class, how he could go not being recognized. I have questions as to, the police officer's ability to be back on the job, being placed in charge of another rookie after he had an incident in his past that I don't think he acted appropriately in, okay?
You're not saying that you believe the police officer might have shot him intentionally?
Do I think that these were racist cops that were, determined to go out and kill a black person that night? No, I do not. What I think is what I know as a minority living where I lived my whole life, that race does play in a fraction of a second. The outer community is conditioned to see black men as a threat. So if it was a matter of a second or two, and you had to choose whether someone was friend or foe, I know that they would have thought my son was foe. Now,
just because of the color of his skin?
Yes, it's, only someone whose skin isn't my color would ask me some of the questions that I keep continuously being asked.
Did the color of my son's skin, did it have something, an effect on what happened that night? I tend to think so.
A number of people have told us, if your son had been white, in those situations, the white police officers may have given him another second. They may have given him 2 more seconds before they opened fire.
Half a second? 1 second? Would that much? That take of a second? Would that have mattered?
Do you blame anybody?
Myself. But that's a tough one. I mean, he could have gotten a car accident, got killed, but I let him become a cop, so.
That's why you blame yourself?
Yeah, sure. Father's supposed to protect his son.
For the Reverend Marlo Washington and other religious and civic leaders in Providence's black community, the official investigation into Cornel Young's death has no credibility.
Anytime, Steve, when you got 9 people on an investigative team, of which 6 of them are from the Providence Police Department to investigate their own people, and you expect the community to sit back and say, okay, the justice was done, justice was rendered.
You haven't got any trust of anybody, no trust in anyone?
None.
When Lisa Young and the black community in Providence didn't get the outside investigation or the answers that they wanted, they decided it was time to bring in their own outside help.
We knew it was going to happen, so this was not surprising. It was expected for us. That was when now we had our little secret advisor, and we brought him out. Here's Johnny.
The healing will begin when there's some fairness and justice.
Johnny is Los Angeles attorney Johnny Cochran, who came to Providence and announced that he was filing a $20 million lawsuit against the city on Lisa Young's behalf. You think if Cornel Young had been white, he'd still be alive?
No, I think so. I think that the officer would have, he would have hesitated. I think if this officer, the shooting officer, had been in the academy with a white officer, out of these circumstances, and that officer came out and was trying to come to assistance, they wouldn't have fired right away. I'm sure he would have recognized him. But here, he had a black officer in the same situation, and he fired. He asked questions later.
Is this a problem for black police officers around the country, do you think?
Oh, I think so. If you talk to many black police officers, they'll tell you one of the worst assignments is working undercover. They're not so worried about the other derelicts or things out there. They're worried about being shot by their fellow officers who come in contact with them.
Johnny Cochran's involvement in the case led some people in Providence to question Lisa Young's motives.
Did Mr. Cochran tell you that he was going to ask for $20 million?
Well, I remember saying, them saying to me an amount, and I said, well, make it $1.50. I just want to know what happened. And they said, no, because if you make it $1.50, they'll pay you $1.50 and you'll never know. If it takes that $20 million figure to make people do what I really believe they should do, if it was $1.50, then go ahead, do 20 million, do 100 million, do 1 trillion million. I want to know what happened to my son.
Providence Mayor Buddy Cianci is facing that $20 million wrongful death and civil rights claim. But surprisingly, Mayor Cianci says he sees the lawsuit as an opportunity.
The city is being sued for $20 million. Of course, we don't like that. But I think sometimes when you think about it, it might be necessary. It might be necessary in order to bring this community together.
Mayor Cianci says he still has plenty of questions about what went on that night and not nearly enough answers to decide if his men did anything wrong.
They clearly did something wrong. They shot one of their fellow officers.
So wait a minute now. That's not the most pleasant thing in the world, that's for sure, and it's a tragedy. But the fact is, when you see, in order to have a crime, you have to have...
not a crime.
Well,
I mean,
well, that's all.
They screwed up. They screwed up.
I'm not willing to go that step.
You're not willing to say that they screwed up.
I'm not willing to go there because you know what? You don't know that, and neither do I.
There's a man dead who wore a uniform, who was dedicated to law enforcement, who was one of the best that we have. I think it goes to their training, and it goes to the attitudes of leaders who don't understand the problem and won't do anything about it. Here's a man who's dead, and he says there's nothing wrong.
For Major Young, who made his career recruiting minorities into the Providence Police Department, it's not that simple. He is torn between the loss of his son and loyalty to a profession he has dedicated his life to. After much soul-searching, he decided not to join his former wife's lawsuit against the city.
26 years being a police officer. I believe in the justice system. That's all we have. If that doesn't work, where are we? So I'm going to sue a system that I've been working under for 26 years. I think it's kind of hypocritical, huh?
You almost quit your job over this.
Sure.
Why?
Job killed my son. Go back to it. But don't go back, and I'm letting them down. Gotta try to make something of this, so I gotta go back, make sure this doesn't happen again. I will make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's what I know him. He would say, yeah, Pops, that's what I want you to do.
After more than a year of work, a special Rhode Island State Commission has issued a report aimed at making sure there will never be another death like Officer Young's. Among dozens of recommendations, ending the policy that requires off-duty police to carry guns, creating a recognition signal for all off-duty police officers to identify themselves, better diversity training for the police, and appointing an independent special state prosecutor to investigate all fatal police shootings. As for the men who shot Officer Young, neither Carlos Sareva or Michael Salitro has returned to active duty.